2006 because I was bored. I had my kids were in school and I needed something new to do, and someone I knew told me that my voice was well suited to blogging. And so I went home and I looked up blogging because I didn't know what it was. And then I started a blog. It was really a mommy blog at that time when those were popular. And then from there, I went on to writing fiction about a year later.
What's your favorite thing to write about?
Oh, I like to write about things that I don't know about, which is not what people usually hear. They usually hear write what you know, but I think that's boring a little bit. I like to write about things I don't know so that I can find out about them and explore them a little bit more.
Are there pieces of you in each of your characters? And if so, which ones and what pieces of your personality?
That's a secret. What are you, crazy?
Not even a little hint?
Well, characters aren't true, like they're not real people, but their emotions are honest. So if something is upsetting to your character, I could think about something that upset me and then write my character upset about her situation. Certainly that's the way to make the emotions of any character authentic, is to think of something similar that happened to you. I also like to write about things that have never happened or things that I don't like, to explore things that are a little bit more unusual.
Like what, for example?
Like a person who's not very nice and somebody that you're glad you don't know, write about that. And maybe they turn around and maybe they don't, or something that has never happened to you. And you can think about how that might affect you or someone that the way they would react to a certain situation. I like to explore the unknown more than the known.
And what does that give you when you explore something that you might not be familiar with? How does the process work? How do you expand on something you don't know about besides all the research, and how much research?
I think it's a matter of a combination of research and imagination and talking and knowing other people. With fiction, you do have a lot of leeway, but for it to be realistic, I also have writers that are good friends of mine that will read something that I wrote. If they had an experience that's close to what I'm writing, they can tell me if it's authentic, if they believe it's authentic.
So why South Haven? And have you been there? And what grabbed you about South Haven?
I went to St. Joseph, Michigan first, and I had lived in Chicago about 10 years before I visited there, and I just didn't know it existed, and I loved it, and I did some research. I was going to make a fictional Michigan town, so I was just researching the area and stumbled upon South Haven, and as you know, it wasn't that far away at the time. Now it's far away, but it wasn't far away then, and I drove there and I know it's kind of, I felt like I had been there before, not in a deja vu kind of a way, but I just felt very at home there. And there, at the time, there was an exhibit about Jewish South Haven. And I spoke to the head of the Historical Association, and she introduced me to my friend Charlene, who was able to give me a lot of insight into the town. And every time I was there, I just really felt like I belonged there. I never really felt like it was something new to me. And I didn't even know places like that existed before. I felt like it was meant to be, like I was supposed to write this story.
So do you find that often, that something just sparks within you and you're like, aha, this is my next topic for my book?
It did happen with this one. The first three are contemporary stories, and the seedlings, I guess, for those books did come more directly from things that had happened to me, and this really didn't. This was sparked by South Haven. Then I saw an article in a newspaper that gave me the beauty contest idea, and then I met Charlene, and she gave me like a real life look into that time period and the present. So, that spark, that was different for me, to have something spark from outside of my own experiences. And that was fun for me. It was a lot of fun. It was the first book that I was sorry to be finished writing. Usually
So how does that,
kind of done.
so what is the process? How do so you had this idea, you got inspired by South Haven and these Jewish hotels that people went to stay at for 2 weeks, the summer. What happens after you get the idea?
I did a lot of research. I still have books and materials, pamphlets, everything that was available on that, which really wasn't that much, honestly, but enough, especially with, they had the original exhibit was in the 80s, so they just used the same materials, and there were some video interviews, and talking to Charlene just gave me real insight into her life and the time period. And it seemed to her and to me that the story that I had imagined was already pretty realistic.
So does the story come to you all at once and then you figure out how to write it, or does it slowly take shape? How do you add the characters?
Each book has been different. For The Last Bathing Beauty, the place and the character, it all kind of came together at once. The story for 1951 came much easier to me than the present day story. Some people say that's because I've already been 18. I haven't yet been 84. But I didn't live in 1951, so I'm not sure that's really why. It just, that story came together much more easily for me than the present day story. But each book has been different, and I would say that is scattershot a word? I don't know that I really have a process. It just all comes together. I write an outline, but I never use it, and I have notes and I look at them, but I don't necessarily use them when I should. And I'm not saying that makes it easier for me, but I did have friends who I shared with them recently that the book that I'm writing now is due in September. And I said, I do not think I can finish this book. And they said, you say that every time. And I said, I do. And they said, yeah, well, we thought you knew that. And I said, no, but thank you for telling me, because that helps, that helps to know that is part of my process. That one friend told me that she thinks it takes me a long time to find the story. And once I find the story, then I'm able to write it. But I kind of have to write my way into it. So I decided to trust that was my process and just go with it.
If you weren't a writer, what would you be doing?
Watching a lot more TV.
Do you get inspiration from what you watch on TV?
I do. I watch a lot of, I try to watch movies and television that, well, I can watch things that have no value to my work, but I also like to watch things that will inform what I'm doing, whether they're for historical fiction. It can be a period piece, or it can just be, a story maybe about friends or a family or a region of the country that will give me some kind of input for something that I need to do, and a little break from writing.
Do you have a routine, like you wake up at 8 o'clock every morning and you write for X amount of hours and you take a break? Is it like a full-time job?
It is definitely a full-time job now that I'm under deadline. Right now, a friend of mine coined the phrase the book bunker, and I'm kind of in the book bunker now because I have a deadline. I do have other work that I do, but I'm not up at 8, I'm up at 5. And I'm usually working, usually between like 5 and 7. I'll do other things besides my writing work. And then during this whole pandemic, I don't like to say there was a silver lining, but some writer groups that I was in have started, Zoom, like meeting to write together on Zoom, separate but together. And that has made us all very accountable and given us a sense of community that's really nice to have. And that has helped.
So how does that work? You're just all on Zoom together and you're all doing your own thing, or you're discussing your projects and getting feedback?
We meet on Zoom like this, and we'll each say really quickly what we want to accomplish in the next 45 minutes. And then we each mute and turn off our video, and the person who runs it rings a gong, and then after 45 minutes she rings chimes, and we all come back and say, kind of what we worked on and if we accomplished our goals, and then we do another 45 minutes. So the whole thing usually takes about 2 hours.
And you see, I'd be like freaking out that I'd have to finish something in a short period of time, but you find that really inspiring and helpful?
I do. It just is a way to also connect and know what other people are doing. We've also started doing one at 8 a.m. Eastern every day. So then before, not just one session, one 45-minute session. And that's a great way to know that before 9 o'clock, I've had 45 minutes of uninterrupted writing time that I might not take if there weren't other people waiting for me.
Right. So where do you have a favorite place where you sit and you write?
Well, that changes. I've had I didn't just move, but I moved about 4 years ago, and I've had a hard time where I'm living now finding a great place to write. I mean, I wrote most of The Last Bathing Beauty here. It definitely works, but my house in Flossmoor was quite large and gave me a lot of options. And I downsized by, I can't do math, 80%. 80%. I live in a very small apartment now. I don't have a lot of options. So I don't sit at a desk usually. I kind of get comfortable to write, bed, chair, sofa, something like that.
Do you write by hand or do you type?
I type. I've started also dictating sometimes my first drafts, because I found that Microsoft Word, when I updated it, it allowed me to dictate, and that I found that really easy. It didn't give me a good clean draft, but it gave me a really quick way to get a lot of words on the page and then to go back and fix them.
What's your favorite book or your favorite author?
I always say that it's whatever I'm reading at the moment, because I don't bother with anything I stop reading if I don't love what I'm reading. I would say that one of my favorite authors is Margaret Atwood. I love Margaret Atwood. I read a lot of things that I wish I could write. I also love Gabrielle Zevin. She wrote I can't remember the name of her books, but I like quirky books, and I've yet to really write, I think, a quirky character or a book. But I like quirky literary fiction, and I do not write quirky literary fiction. So,
is there one author that you would say is your hero, your role model, that if you had an opportunity to meet them, dead or alive, who would you want to have dinner with?
Oh, I know a lot of authors, so that's really hard, and I really admire women authors who have young children, because I know a lot of them, and they write great books, and they have little kids running around that I'm not really sure how they do that. So not anyone really in particular, but as a whole, I think women have a higher standard for their fiction to hold up to, and they're under more scrutiny And so I admire women authors who come up against all those roadblocks.
What's your writing kryptonite? Like what blocks you or stops you or
Popcorn.
That's Eileen's favorite food,
Well,
popcorn. That's Eileen's favorite food, popcorn.
no. Well, if I have it, I have to eat it, but then it gets all over your hands and I can't use like the tracking pad of my computer. So I have found that stops me.
So no popcorn while
No
you're
popcorn
while you're writing.
Right.
So when you were younger, is this the path that you imagined for yourself?
I don't know that it's the path that I imagined for myself at all. I think I always liked to write, but I never really imagined myself writing fiction. I didn't start writing fiction until I was 42. All the other writing I did was essays and articles or blog posts. Everything was true, so I never really pictured myself making things up and writing a book or writing something that was 85,000 words long. Before I wrote my first novel, the longest thing I had written was 3,000 words. So I think I did not see myself as able to do that, but I'd never tried.
And why did someone inspire you to write the book? Did you just decide you were going to give it a try? I mean, going from 3,000 to 85,000 words is a huge jump. And I can't do that math either.
Yeah, I took some writing classes online and they were all about, it was memoir or essay, and there were some things that I didn't want, you'll always want to tell the truth. And so, but you have to if you're writing. And my instructor suggested that I try fiction if I didn't want to use the nuggets of the truth to make up a story. And that's what I did and haven't stopped since.
Do you think, you mentioned earlier that you admire women with young children who are writers. Being a woman, do you think it's difficult to write characters of the opposite sex? Like you wrote the grandfather and you wrote the boyfriend.
No, I haven't written from a male point of view, though. I don't know that I would. I haven't yet tried that. I don't know that I would, or that I would even want to. I enjoy writing books about women for women to read. Not that I have anything against men, but I do. I know that my books are meant for women to read them and appreciate them. So, I hope the men I read are realistic, but I don't know that I would write from their point of view.
Why do you think it would be difficult? That's why, or you just have no desire?
Well, I do love a challenge. I always said The Last Bathing Beauty was the book that almost killed me. Took me 3 years to write it, and I do like a challenge, but I don't know that I could. I don't know if the voice of a male character would come easily to me. It might. I don't know, but might be something. I never say never.
So the two previous books to this one, how long did they take you to write, and why do you think this book took you so long?
There were 3 books before this one.
I apologize.
That's okay. The first book took about 3 years. The second 2 each took about a year, and The Last Bathing Beauty took 3 years. I think one reason was the research. I had never done anything historical, and although it's 1951, it is considered historical fiction. And that was a lot more research. It was a real place, a real time, and it was very important to me to get it right. Because, people will call you out on anything, and that happens anyway. But it was very important for me to get it right and to get the feel of the place right, in addition to just the facts. So I felt like that was helpful to know Charlene, and also to be able to visit there. And also that present day storyline just did not really honestly come together until the end.
So, so it's interesting that you say that authors, get called out and stuff. J.K. Rowling is really in a lot of turmoil right now for some of the comments, and I haven't read them. So, but what do you think about authors using their voices to encourage or discourage political activities?
I think if they're ready for for whatever backlash would come, that's, then that's their prerogative. I know authors who certainly do that and don't care if people stop buying their books. I don't know if they feel strongly or they have enough sales. I kind of don't really melt the two, but I don't make anything. I don't hide how I feel about things, but I'm not taking a stand based on my books or my job as an author. If somebody wants to stop reading your books because they don't like your political views, then that's really okay with me. And I think authors who do that probably feel that way. People who say things unintentionally and create a firestorm, that happens as well. And that's not, that sometimes has to do with ego or things like that. And that's a different story.
How do you come up with the names for your characters?
Sometimes they just come to me, really, or it's a name that I particularly like, and I've always wanted to use it. Or you can go to the Social Security website and look up a particular year and see the most popular names for that year, the 100 most popular girls' names and boys' names, so that it can be realistic historically, and that you can use that for present names as well. If you're setting a story in 1995, you might want to know what the most popular names were. Not that you have to pick a popular name, but you probably will have it more realistic if it's, something. If you have a mainstream type of character, they would probably pick a mainstream name. So
the beauty contest was a real thing. Yes. In South Haven, and was 1951 actually the last year that they had it?
No. I don't know if they ever stopped or not. That was really I read the art. I saw the picture and read the short article about the winner, who was a granddaughter of a resort owner. And that just kicked it off for me. I wondered, I don't remember her name. I didn't try to find out about her, but I thought, I wonder what her story is, and I wonder what happened to her. So I made it up.
And it made for a very good read.
Thank you.
I do want to open it up if there are other questions. You're welcome to type them into the chat box for me, and I will ask Amy the questions. So do you believe in writer's block? Like, are there just days that you sit down and say, nope, not today?
I actually don't believe in it. And when I talk to other writers, because I do coach and edit other writers, and I try to be kind, but I really don't believe. I think you can do anything to spur your writing. It doesn't actually have to be writing. It can be music or a TV show or a movie like you talked about before, or anything can really spur the ideas. It doesn't have to be writing itself. So I don't really believe in writer's block.
Let's see. How do you balance what you want people to read or understand from your book as opposed to what the reader wants to get out of the book?
Well, you can't make everybody happy, first of all. I learned with my first book, it was kind of a shock. Like, you can't sit with everyone who reads it and tell them what you meant or what your intention was. You just can't do that. I know that there are writers who will say, they want to teach a lesson or they want something to come across. And maybe it's selfish, but I write my books for me, to help me learn something, to help me figure something out, to help me express myself. And I figure I'm not so unique. If it's interesting to me, it might be interesting to someone else. And I do know more about the craft of writing and storytelling than I did before. So I do take into consideration the elements that are necessary to propel a reader through a story. But I really don't think about what the reader necessarily wants specifically, because sometimes giving a reader what they don't want makes for a much better story.
Was there something that you took out of the book that you're looking back now, you're sorry you took it out, or is there something that you wished you had added that maybe you didn't?
I was, for my second book, The Good Neighbor, I did take a lot out that I wished that I had left in. There was more about, but there's a neighbor, strangely, the good neighbor. There's a neighbor in the book, and I took out a lot of her story. And the questions that I got from readers about that book were about that character, wishing there was more about her. So I was really sorry I had removed it. But The Last Bathing Beauty really, honestly, turned out better than I would have hoped. So I was really pleased.
Do you read your reviews?
Well, on Amazon, I filter the 5-star reviews and I read those. I figure, why make myself feel bad? The book is published. I'm not going to change anything. And a lot of people who write 1-star or bad reviews are quite nasty. I'm not looking for help on writing books from readers, like not in a bad way, but people who write bad reviews are usually pretty nasty. So I would rather give people more of what they like, since obviously it was probably what I liked also. The Last Bathing Beauty seems to be resonating with a lot of people. And I did realize last week that I feel a lot, not in a bad way, but there's a lot of pressure for the new book to resonate in a similar fashion. Not necessarily the same way, but at the same level. So I do feel like I wouldn't want to disappoint readers with the next book. Not that I would intend to, but it seems to have had an emotional impact on a lot of people. And they seem to have really embraced the characters, which I'm thrilled, because they're the first characters that I was sorry to leave behind. So that I hope the same is true for the next book.
So even though you wouldn't tell me what parts of the characters you might be of you start a relationship with them.
Absolutely. Well, I start to think of them, and it makes you sound crazy. They're really real to me, and with my first book, the main character's name is Evie, and it's hard when you start writing fiction to not put yourself in the place of the main character. So I had little sticky notes all around my computer. What would Evie do? Because it wasn't what I would do, and I had a hard time taking myself out of the picture. What would she do? What would your character do? And that has become easier for me. I hate to say easy when it comes to anything with writing a book, but it has become easier for me to separate myself from my characters and think, what would they do? And it may be nothing like something that I would do.
Do you base the characters on other people that you know? If you try and keep yourself out of it, do you take strengths or weaknesses from other people that you know and put them into the characters?
In The Last Bathing Beauty, I definitely did with my friend Charlene, who really inspired a lot of the book. I think I hate to use the word spunk or fire, but she's just very inspirational to me. So I hoped that came through. It's not about her, but she did inspire me in a lot of ways. In the first book, I did use people that I know to inspire characters, but after that, except for Charlene, I really did not. You know, I think of people, may think of someone's hair or their clothes, you know, to be able to picture something and then transcribe that to the page with words that people can imagine themselves, but not people in particular.
So no one's going to find any secrets about themselves hidden in your books.
Nope. I know that can be disappointing, but no. Unless somebody wants to tell me something really juicy.
Were you a voracious reader as a child? Did you enjoy books? Like for myself, I wasn't a reader as a child, but now, like, you know, my mom's constantly asking me, did you watch this? Did you watch that? No, I'm reading. I don't have time to watch TV.
I think I read, but I was not a crazy voracious reader. I have read more as an adult for sure. And I read a lot while I'm writing.
What's your favorite genre?
When I was writing The Last Bathing Beauty, I only read historical fiction. I read very little else. The occasional, you know, literary fiction or contemporary novel, but for the most part, I like to see what kind of feeling I'd like to evoke from the book. You know, it was new for me, so all the description that goes into historical fiction was different than contemporary. And so I wanted to assess what I thought was too much or not enough, and how other authors portrayed different areas of the past. So I really, for over 3 years, I only really read historical fiction, American historical fiction mostly, or 20th century fiction.
That happens to be my favorite genre, is historical fiction. So I do read a lot of it, but I don't think I could ever write a book.
Never say never.
Never say never. So what one thing would you give up to become a better writer, or do you think that where you are is where you want to be?
I think I always want to be better. I always challenge myself. With each book, I try to do something I've never done before, you know, in the craft of writing or in the type of story. I think what I would have to give up to be a better writer is TV. You know, because I watch way too much. Even when I'm super busy, I make time for TV. I have always loved TV.
Is that like your escape from reality?
Yes, definitely.
Because I think that's what I do with books, especially.
Reading is it. I mean, I love to read, but it's part of my job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I have to read, and I'm reading books now, and I'm reading them for research. And I work with writers, so I read their stories, and so I have to stop reading if I really want to break.
Makes sense. It's like Eileen and I watching movies, because we do the film festival and we watch a lot of movies. So I don't watch too many outside of of work.
I listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that it is a way I consume most of my books right now. But the research materials really have to be read. Most of them are obviously research. They're older. A lot of them aren't available. And you want to be able to take notes or highlight things. So for pleasure, I will, I will listen to books.
Do you find that, have you read a book and then listened to the book, and does it change the way you view the book after? Because I find that, you know, I hear a certain voice in my head when I'm reading, and I've not done an audiobook because I'm afraid I'll miss out on my own voice in the book. Does that make sense?
I haven't done it that way, but I have bought a book after I've listened to the audiobook, but then just because I wanted to have it.
Mm-hmm.
a physical book.
What's the first book you read that ever made you cry?
I couldn't tell. I don't remember. I really like to read happy books, to be honest.
I mean, yes, I agree.
Books do make me, book can make you cry, but I'm not like, somebody will say, oh, you have to read this. It's super sad. No, thanks.
Right.
The world's sad enough. I'll take a happy book, please.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Does anyone in the audience have any questions they would like to ask? You can unmute yourself and ask your questions if you'd like. Yeah, go ahead, Linda. You have to unmute yourself, please.
I did. Okay. Yeah, I threw it into the chat. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Linda.
I don't have the chat open, so that's not helpful.
I'll put it right out there. I'm also a writer. So I am curious, though, have you ever had a reader find something in a book that, a theme or something that she came to her that you actually never even thought of as you were writing it? Some kind of revelation for you?
Not that anyone has ever shared with me. I've heard from a lot of readers about The Last Bathing Beauty. People have, and to extremes, people who are nothing like the characters and have never even heard of South Haven or been to the Midwest. The one that comes to mind is I have had lovely conversations with a young 30-something Latina mother in Southern California who loved the book and just loved it and was so gracious. And then I've heard from a lot of older Jewish people who have their own stories about South Haven, or their own stories about, their parents or their grandparents that are similar. So that's really who has reached out about this book more than, and I've heard from many, many more people about this book than any of the others.
Well, that's a good feeling.
It is a good feeling, especially because it took so long to write it. And I do, and you're not supposed to have a favorite, but this is my favorite.
So we have a question. We had a question, and I apologize, I didn't have the chat turned on. My bad. But do characters evolve as you write them? Do they start off as one thing and then maybe in the end totally different than what you had originally envisioned?
Absolutely. It really just happened to me with my book that I'm writing now. I finished a first draft and went back to rewrite the second draft, and I was even amazed how much more I knew my characters, and I went back in that things could change for them because I knew them better. And they do and their stories change also sometimes, but definitely you get to know them better and more what would be realistic for them to do, because one thing is fiction isn't true, but it has to be believable. Things have to be plausible. And so that's, and for the characters also, you need your reader to believe that that character would do or say that thing. And I was much more clear about what that would be after getting through the book one time.
We have another question from Susan. You have to unmute yourself, please. You're still muted, Susan.
There you go. There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay. I know when I'm really into a book, I feel like I fall into it and everybody becomes either my family or my friend, and then I see I'm getting to the end and I don't want it to end. So like, maybe I'll allow myself to read 1 page a day. And then when it's over, it's like, I miss them. They were my family. They were my friends. Have you, yours after 3 years has to feel like that.
Yeah, it was the first book that the other books, people had asked this question, and I really felt, I mean, I loved writing those books, and they're important to me, but I really felt like when they were over, I was done. You know, I had kind of had enough, and the story, I didn't really think about the characters anymore. I used to say they lived in perpetuity on the last page. Whatever they were doing is what they were still. People would say, oh, well, what do you think that Evie's doing now? I'm like, she's still washing dishes, because that's where I left her, you know. And but this is the first book that I really didn't know if I would find another story to write that would engage me as deeply, and characters that would be as important to me as those had become. What I did.
What advice would you give to an aspiring writer?
I get asked this a lot, and I would really say to be kind to yourself, you know, and that everybody's a beginner at some point, and it's not easy to write anything. It's easy to write, but it's not easy to write well. It's hard work. And just be kind to yourself, and know that you will evolve as a writer, and there are a lot of resources out there. So, you know, avail yourself of them, and be kind to yourself in the process. Don't beat yourself up.
So other than TV, do you have any other hobbies that you?
I'm teaching myself how to crochet.
Oh.
I'm not doing
okay.
very well, but I am trying.
There are great videos on YouTube. Great videos on YouTube.
That's how I'm doing it. Yes, so I'm teaching myself how to crochet. And really what I love to do is read and write. So I have, you know, and when I'm watching TV, if it has to do with my story, I enjoy that, and I enjoy writing. It is work, but I enjoy it so much that I don't mind all the time that it takes.
Well, if there are no other questions, anyone? Last call
I think
for
there's a
questions.
question in the chat.
Yeah, there are quite a few. Who came up with the book cover art?
My publisher has, I think they might use freelancers, but most publishers have designers, or they contract designers. I was pretty involved with this cover. I was really lucky because the first, they sent me vintage photographs, 5 vintage photographs of women in bathing suits, because they did want. I said I never wanted a face on my cover or bare feet. I don't like bare feet cover, and I have both a face and bare feet. But so never say never. And when I saw that woman, she just, you know, was black and white. They colorized it, and she really embodied what I thought of for Betty. Yeah, I said I didn't want to be mean, but the other girls weren't pretty enough for me, you know, even if it was only, you know, sort of like Betty. I think it still needed to be, you know, a really pretty girl on, you know, on the beach. And then they put the lighthouse in the background, and I believe it's actually South Haven's lighthouse, or it looks just like it.
Do you think any of your books will become screenplays and make it to a film, maybe on the Hallmark Channel?
I don't know. That would be really nice. You know, there has been interest. Those things tend to take years, especially now. Like nothing is happening. There was someone who was interested in this book, but you can't. It's really hard, I think, to shop a book that you want to turn into a screenplay when nothing's being made. So yeah, it would be nice.
Are you writing about women in your life, raising children? You know, how does it bothered me a little bit that Betty's parents kind of just, you know, dropped her off at the grandparents and off she went. So off they went. Is that something you're familiar with, or it was just totally part of your imagination? My
mother here didn't abandon me. No, my mother's here. No, but I wanted the story to be about Betty and her grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I didn't want, I did have some death in some other books. So my agent asked me not to have dead people. So the parents couldn't, so the parents left,
How do you balance writing dual timelines?
It
I'm
was
not sure what that means.
a dual timeline is what this book was. It was,
Oh, I see. Modern day and
yeah,
Mhm.
2 years. It wasn't easy. I had reached out to historical fiction authors that I know before I wrote the book, just because I couldn't really wrap my head around how you would do it, but I knew that I wanted to. And they all said that they wrote their books the way they were read, so they could deal with the transitions, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't write 1951 and then jump to 2017. So I wrote each timeline separately and then
Oh, interesting.
folded them together. Yeah, and that was a nightmare.
Why? I mean, you had two stories and you needed to put them together.
Right, because where they intersect needs to make sense. They have to intersect for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's two stories that make one big story, so they have to intersect intentionally. Everything in fiction is intentional. Nothing is an accident at all. It might, except if, you misspell a word and nobody ever catches it, which happens. But
Right.
everything that happens in a story is intentional, whether you like it or not, or whether it seems like an accident. It's not an accident. That was hard to do. I don't know if I could do it any differently if I chose to do it again. But I
Well,
would.
it worked. You made it work.
I made it work. There was a review that I called my agent and I laughed and I said, I read it to her and it says something about how the author easily intersected the timeline. I said, easily? It almost killed me when I did that. It was hard to do.
But in the end, that's the kind of review you want, right? That you came through with what you had hoped to accomplish.
Exactly. I enjoyed the two timelines. For me, it was writing two separate stories. So that was fun. That was fun for me.
What is your next genre? What's the
Historical fiction as well, although it's also mid-century, but it's 1962 instead of 1951, which doesn't sound like that long ago, but in the world of literature, if it's more than 50 years old, it's considered historical. So in 1962, I found that I like to write about just before everything changes, or in time. 1951 was right before the kind of the 50s blew up. This wasn't the time of Bobby socks or poodle skirts that everyone knows about. 51 was more like the late 40s than the late 50s, but it was inching along. And 1962 is before the 60s that you think about. So I like thinking about what was happening right before everything blows up, metaphorically. But so that's was set in 1962. This time in Philadelphia, which was meant to be easy for me to research, but is not, since everything closed.
Do you find that your research has been more difficult because we've been staying at home for so many weeks? Like, do you go out into places and do your research that way, or do you prefer to do it online at home?
I would have liked to have gone out. I don't know that I will. The book is due September 1st, so I don't know that I will have the time to use resources that would be available to me through, like the Philadelphia Public Library would have a lot of resources, but I don't know that they will be open. And I would like to go to the neighborhood that I'm writing about, and I probably could do that at some point just to drive around, but it would have been much easier before this.
I think Linda had a question.
Yeah, I did. So this is historical fiction because of the period of time, but yet it's women's fiction.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is a writerly question. Is it being pushed as women's or historical women's or?
This book, The Last Bathing Beauty,
Yeah.
was really it really fell under historical fiction, and it did a lot of Jewish, it was on in all the Jewish historical fiction categories, like on Amazon.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, I think I've asked all my questions. Does anyone have any last questions? Amy, I don't normally get to moderate, so I appreciate you.
You did a great job.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. But it's really amazing for me to be able to meet the people whose books I'm reading. And I really hope that everybody enjoyed it. You're a pleasure to talk to, and I'm looking forward to the next book. I'm going to go back and read those 3 books that I haven't read yet. But thank you so much for joining us. We wish you the very best. The very best. And please check out jccchicago.org. We've got lots more author talks coming up. We've got some historical visits at Frank Lloyd Wright locations, and we're going to have a presentation on Wednesday about Monet in Chicago. So thanks all of you for joining us. Amy, best, and we look forward to seeing the next book.
Thank you. Thanks.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.